Okay, so have you ever like been in a house and it's totally quiet and then bang, like you hear something?
Oh, yeah.
And maybe a door slams or, something falls over and you're like, what was that?
Right.
And maybe like half of your brain's like, oh, it must be the wind or, the house settling or something.
Mhm.
But the other half of your brain's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Could it be like a ghost or a poltergeist or something?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, this idea of poltergeists. And we've got all these theories, all these different ideas about what they could be.
Exactly. And it's so interesting because, like you said, half of our brain kind of wants to jump to this supernatural explanation. But, when we look at the actual evidence, it's not so clear.
Right. And I think that's the really fun part about it.
Yeah.
Is that we're diving into all these different ideas.
Yeah.
And I think we should start with the most basic one, which is like,
okay,
maybe it's not a ghost at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Maybe it's something like totally normal happening.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize how much just like the environment around us can really cause these weird sounds and experiences.
Like you're saying, like a house settles and pipes make noise. And
yeah, like think about it. Have you ever heard like a weird creaking in your house at night?
Oh, yeah.
It's probably just, the wood expanding or contracting.
Right.
But in the moment, it can feel really creepy, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so are you saying that like some of these poltergeist stories could just be like a creaky floorboard or something?
Exactly. I mean, there was a study in 2015 by the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, and they looked at a bunch of these reported cases.
Oh, wow.
And so many of them just came down to like faulty wiring, causing lights to flicker or, drafts slamming doors shut.
It's funny how our minds can kind of like fill in the blanks,
Totally. We love a good ghost story, so it's easy to jump to that conclusion.
Right. And it's even more interesting when you think about like the psychology of it, right? Like what if it's not even really happening outside of ourselves? What if it's
right? What if it's all in our heads?
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting angle too, because, our brains are powerful things. And when we're stressed or anxious, they can play tricks on us.
Yeah.
Like you've probably heard of hallucinations, right? Where you see or hear things that aren't really there, or delusions where you have these false beliefs that you're just absolutely convinced are true.
Right. And so like someone could think their house is haunted.
Exactly.
But really it's just like their brain kind of messing with them.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you have this thing called confirmation bias.
Oh, yeah.
Where like if you already believe in ghosts, you're more likely to interpret anything weird as evidence of a ghost.
It's like you're looking for it.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it makes you wonder, right? Like how much of this is really happening out there in the world and how much is happening up here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that scientists and researchers are still trying to figure out.
Totally. And then there's this other theory about poltergeists that is just wild.
Oh, yeah. This one's really interesting.
Yeah. This one is like, it blew my mind when I first heard about it. It's the idea that poltergeists are connected to puberty.
Right. Yeah. Teenagers.
Yeah. And I'm like, how on earth?
I know it sounds crazy, right?
Yeah. Like how could like raging hormones make a lamp fly across the room?
Well, so the idea is that, puberty is this time of like massive brain changes, right? The brain is like rewiring itself, especially the limbic system, which controls emotions.
Oh, okay.
And the prefrontal cortex, which is all about decision making and, not doing dumb stuff.
Right. So are they saying that teenagers are basically like walking electrical storms?
Well, not quite. But the theory is that all this brain activity could create these fluctuations in the brain's electromagnetic field.
Okay. Remind me what that is again.
So basically our brains, they generate these tiny electrical currents, right? And those currents, they create a magnetic field around us. And the theory is that during puberty, that field might become kind of unstable and maybe...
So unstable that it could like move things.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's still very much a hypothesis, though.
Right. I mean, I would imagine it's pretty hard to prove.
Yeah, there have been some anecdotal accounts, like stories of poltergeist activity happening when a teenager hits puberty.
Oh, interesting.
But it's really hard to say for sure if that's the cause,
Right. It could just be a coincidence.
Exactly.
It's like a chicken or the egg thing,
Totally.
It's so fascinating, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about environmental factors. We've talked about psychology. We've talked about teenagers. What else is there?
Oh, well, there's this really interesting idea that some of what we experience as poltergeist activity might actually be sound.
Sound.
Yeah, sound. And specifically these low-frequency sounds called infrasound.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, so infrasound is below the range of human hearing.
Or we can't even hear it.
Right, we can't consciously hear it, but it can still affect us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there have been studies showing that infrasound can cause all sorts of weird feelings like unease and anxiety.
Oh, reliably.
Yeah, and even hallucinations.
So it's like even though we can't hear it, it's like messing with our bodies and our minds?
Exactly. And there's this really famous study by a guy named Vic Tandy back in the 90s.
Okay.
And he was working in this lab and kept feeling like there was a presence in the room. You know, like someone was watching him.
Creepy.
Yeah, and he even saw things out of the corner of his eye, but there was never anyone there.
Wow.
And it turned out that there was this fan in the lab that was emitting infrasound.
No way.
Yeah, and when he turned the fan off, the creepy feeling went away.
So it was like the sound was creating the illusion of a ghost.
Exactly. It's pretty wild, right?
That is wild.
Yeah.
Because we've got infrasound, we've got teenagers, we've got psychology, we've got environmental factors. What else?
Oh, there's a few more quick ones.
Okay, hit me.
So there's the idea that emotional stress can kind of be a source of energy for poltergeist activity. Like maybe if someone's going through a really tough time, their emotions could somehow manifest as these weird events.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then there's also the possibility that we're just misinterpreting ordinary things. Like maybe a curtain blowing in the wind looks like a ghostly figure, or, you know, a car backfiring sounds like a gunshot.
Right.
And then there's also the whole thing with those orbs of light that people catch on camera.
Oh, yeah.
Which, you know, a lot of times it's just dust particles reflecting light or insects flying close to the lens.
Right. Yeah. It's funny how a camera can make things look so different.
Totally.
Okay. So before we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious about the word poltergeist itself. Like it just sounds so spooky.
It does, right? It's a great word.
Yeah. Where does it come from?
So it actually comes from German.
Oh, okay.
And it's a combination of two words, poltern, which means to rumble or make a noise,
Okay.
and Geist, which means ghost or spirit.
So literally a noisy ghost.
Exactly. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah, it really fits the bill. All right. So even with all these theories, it seems like the mystery of poltergeists is still kind of unsolved.
Yeah, we might never know for sure what's really going on.
But I guess that's part of the fun, right?
Totally. It leaves us with something to think about.
Right. And to wonder about. So here's a thought to leave you with.
Okay.
If you could ask a poltergeist one question, what would it be?
Ooh.
Just something to ponder, you know?
Yeah, I like that.
All right. Until next time, happy haunting.
Take care.